guys, today I want to talk with you about These Violent Delights, a young adult fantasy romance novel by Chloe Gong. It was first published in 2020 and it's the first book in These Violent Delights duology. As per usual, we will start this video with a short synopsis, then proceed to the non-spoiler review and wrap this video up with the spoilers. If you haven't read These Violent Delights yet, do not worry, I will make sure to let you know when the spoilers begin. So These Violent Delights is an imaginative retelling of William Shakespeare's arguably most well-known tragedy, Romeo and Juliet. Though instead of following these star-crossed lovers in 16th century's Verona, we follow the offsprings of two rival gangs in 1926 in Shanghai. And if the never-ending gang war was not enough, the people of the city start talking about a disease, a madness, a monster of sorts. As death bodies start to pile up, Roma and Giulietta are forced to put their disagreements aside and join the forces in order to eliminate this immediate threat. Now, I have to admit that for the longest time I didn't even know about the existence of this book. And then one day I was looking for some romance novels which are based heavily on enemies to lovers trope, and the moment I realized that These Violent Delights are loosely based on Shakespeare, someone whom I was low-key obsessed with while growing up, I knew I have to read it as soon as possible. And overall, I found this book to be thoroughly enjoyable. These Violent Delights is a very different read than the original. It is quite obvious that the author just took this general idea of two powerful feuding families and ran with it. And I honestly didn't mind that at all. I think it was a great decision, as this way you get something that is vaguely familiar, yet at the same time you have no idea what might actually happen in the novel, and that's exciting. Another thing that I have to point out and compliment the author on is that the main characters, Roma and Giulietta, were actually aged up for this novel. Here they are 19 and 18 years old respectively, which I thought was a wonderful decision, as both of them are actually quite involved with their very much illegal family businesses. They're not some innocent teenagers who just fell in love with one another despite their parents' wishes. Instead, they are the ones actually actively working to secure their family's position in power, even if that includes them themselves participating in rather shady activities. And having them actively involved in all of this lets us experience the world through their eyes, and consequently, instead of having a tale of star-crossed lovers, we get a deeper story that also includes Shanghai during a rather interesting time period. In this book, we get to witness first-hand the cultural changes that arise from globalization and colonization. Overall, the world build and the characters are very well established. The fantasy aspect is intriguing and it grabs you from the very first pages. You keep on reading because you want to know what will happen, not only with the main leads, but because you want to get some sort of resolution and explanation to the monster that is causing this madness. On a more negative side, if you picked up or are planning to pick up These Violent Delights because you are craving some forbidden love, I have to disappoint you, as the novel doesn't really have a lot of romance in it. The chemistry between the characters is there and it's great, but this love story is without a doubt an afterthought when it comes to the big picture. During the first half of the book, Roma and Giulietta spends maybe 2, max 3 moments alone, so there isn't really that much build-up, that much yarning. That being said, one thing that I must point out is that rather quickly in the book we learn that Roma and Giulietta have a history together, which predates the events of this book. I thought that was great, as it makes this feud between them personal. Roma and Giulietta do not hate each other just for the sake of it, just because their families do, which makes the enemies to lovers trope more realistic, better developed, as it is difficult to hate with passion someone you have never actually met before. Overall, These Violent Delights is a solid read. It's definitely written with more of a young adult audience in mind, but me, someone who just turned 30, still found it to be very enjoyable. This novel flows very easily, it immerses you into the story so well that you can read it for hours without needing a break, as it doesn't have much of a mental drain on you. It's simply a pure delight. And on this note, I think we should move to the spoiler review so we could talk a little more about the individual characters of the book, as well as discuss a few issues that I had with the way this novel ended. So if you haven't read These Violent Delights yet, now it's a great time for you to click off this video. As I have shortly mentioned in my non-spoiler review, I have picked up this book because it was recommended to me as an enemies to lovers romance novel. And to be honest, as a romance novel, These Violent Delights felt rather weak to me. And that's mostly because the romance angle felt somewhat underdeveloped. If anything, there were only 2 chapters in the whole book that were heavy on romance. Now, I'm not saying that the book needed to be inherently romantic, but as this is a story loosely based on Romeo and Juliet, I feel like a lot of people, me included, expected it. Now, what I found very interesting, however, was that Juliet and Roma have already had a relationship/friendship going on prior to the story of this book. Something that was mentioned multiple times, but wasn't explicitly explored. Now, I feel like being able to read a couple of chapters set in the past would have raised the stakes. It would have made me understand better the connection our main leads have. Like, sure, I was told what happened that made them hate each other so much. I'm well aware what caused this divide, but the divide itself would have been much more impactful for me as a reader if I would have gotten a chance to experience what type of relationship exactly they were losing. For most parts, I have to admit that I found These Violent Delights to be a great novel. It had interesting thoughts, interesting ideas. The mashup of romance and fantasy and the political and cultural influences actually worked really well. And yet I can't define this book as 5 out of 5 because I wasn't really satisfied with the ending of the novel. First of all, Paul being the big baddie and Paul being in love with Giulietta didn't make that much sense to me, especially the being in love part. That was just so out of blue. I mean, if the author wanted me to believe that Paul has some sort of weird obsession with Giulietta, or even that he is honestly in love with her, I needed to see him more than twice in the book communicating with her. I needed at the very least to hear about his efforts to seek her out or get to know her or whatever else. But now it just honestly feels like throughout the first part of the book, Paul is trying to get into Giulietta's good graces because he's trying to manipulate her in order to become a part of the Scarlets, and there doesn't seem to be any actual genuine feelings concerning Giulietta. And then in the end of the book, he suddenly changes his attitude and goes all, I'm gonna give you the vaccine and save all the Scarlets and we're gonna live happily ever after because I'm just so in love with you. Like, if we start with him only showing Giulietta the attention because he wants to manipulate her, and we finish it with him desperately in love, then I want to know what the hell happened in between. And even so, let's assume that he is actually head over heels for her now. Was that even necessary? It appeared out of nowhere, it felt weird, and it didn't really add anything of value to the plot. If anything, I think I would have preferred if the author would continue leaning into Paul's wish to be part of Scarlet's and use that as a reason on why Giulietta should be by his side. He should have tried to show her how well they could rule over the city together. Overall, Paul being the big baddie could have been great, but when I stopped and thought about it a little bit more, I realized that this revelation starts poking holes into one of the previous scenes of the book, when Giulietta and Roma go to visit Larkspur. That scene doesn't really make much sense for me then, because Giulietta rips the curtain down and she gets to see him, and yes, he's covering his face, but she gets to see the rest of him. She sees his build, his body, his height, his hair, his hands. I believe that just by getting a good look at his build, Giulietta could have realized the approximate age category Larkspur is in. We know that he is 19-ish, and I mean the body of a 19-year-old and a 50-year-old do look somewhat different. So for me, it is weird that despite seeing him, Giulietta still didn't have any suspicion of Paul being Larkspur. None at all. Especially when she already believes that this doctor, this miracle worker named Larkspur, is someone that they personally know. Someone they have interacted with before. So tell me then, how does a young British man who arrived in the city practically at the same time as the madness started, after this meeting, still did not end up being on the top of the list of the suspects? Now, I'm not saying that she was supposed to recognize him instantly, but some light bulb moment could have been there. Something that would make her think, plant the seed, make her doubt. But the thing that I didn't like the most about the ending is that by the end of this book, we circle back to the beginning of it. And back to Roma and Giulietta being enemies because of misunderstanding. Overall, most of their problems and 4 years ago and now comes from them not communicating. Well, and from the murders, obviously, though they seem to be quite quick at forgiving that. And I just didn't particularly like that there was absolutely no way for Giulietta to send Roma a message telling him that Marshall is alive before they would manage to sneak into each other's houses, send each other letters, and now when it really matters, there's just no way to share this information, and therefore Roma needs to be furious with Giulietta and they need to be broken up. And I can already see the second novel starting with Roma being mad at Giulietta and Giulietta being too proud to explain her motives and her actions, and we gonna get another 200 pages of them being mean to each other until Roma learns that Marshall is alive, and then he will start to reconsider that maybe Giulietta is not that big of a monster, and so they will start this romance again until one of them does something stupid again. Truth be told, they just don't trust one another and maybe they shouldn't really be together. And it's not only their personal relationship that circled back to the beginning of the book. Basically, the same thing happened with the monster. Sure, we defeated the one in this book just to get a cliffhanger that Paul created a bigger, better monster who will kill everyone. So we started these violent delights with Roma and Giulietta being enemies, Shanghai being under attack by a monster and Communist Party while simultaneously heavily influenced by globalization. And we finished this book with Roma and Giulietta being enemies again, Shanghai is being threatened by a new monster, and is still under attack of Communist Party while simultaneously heavily influenced by globalization. That being said, one thing that I enjoyed a lot about the ending was the whole situation with Marshall's death. I thought it was cleverly made, and I did enjoy the callback to the Shakespeare's original. And what I appreciated the most is that it wasn't Roma Giulietta who took the serum. It was a nice callback, yet it wasn't something that at least I actually expected until Giulietta started her tough girl act and all that eye for eye bullshit. Then of course, I realized what was going to happen. But when the serum, the poison, were first introduced in the book, I immediately assumed that we will get something more in line with the original, and that either Giulietta or Roma will be the ones consuming it. So I guess what I'm saying is that I'm glad to be wrong. Now before we wrap this up, I also want to dedicate a bit of time to talk about the characters of these violent delights. I liked it a lot that quite some time was spent exploring the side characters of the novel. I ended up loving Marshall and Kathleen to death. They both are such sweethearts. Marshall is funny and so relaxed, simply a down-to-earth kind of guy. He brightened up every scene he showed up in. And when it comes to Kathleen, I appreciated her unwavering loyalty above anything else. She's amazing. Benedict is fine. I mean, he was definitely interesting to read about. He just didn't feel like a good time the same way Marshall did. He felt a bit too serious, a bit too stuck up for me to truly enjoy him. So if anything, my hope for Benedict is that he will actually start dating Marshall and loosen up a bit. As for Rosalind, she is probably the character that confuses me the most. All through the novel, she just felt kinda off. At first I assumed that she's just jealous of Giulietta, and then I thought that maybe she's just jealous of the relationship Giulietta has with Kathleen. But at the end of the day, I don't really know what her actual problem is. I mean, I became suspicious of her rather quickly. She was my only guess when it came to who could be the traitor from the inner circle, who delivers all the information to the White Flowers. Yet at the same time, I just can't truly understand what would be her motivation for doing so. Like, sure, she's concerned about not being related to Giulietta's family by blood, which makes her expendable. I get that, but still, she has much deeper connections with the Scarlets than she would be able to have with White Flowers. So why risk losing that? Lastly, I want to point out that despite me reading this book, I still can't say that I know much about Roma, the second lead of the novel. I get that he's loyal to his sister and he's loyal to his friends, and he says that he's in love with Giulietta and he has that moral compass that doesn't allow him to do some things, but at the same time he's not too concerned about being a part of some other illegal activities at all. It's just so weird for me because by the end of the book I can say that I know and I understand Giulietta and Benedict and Marshall and Kathleen but I can't say the same thing about Roma. Even now, after finishing the book, I can't say that I believe that he loves Giulietta. I do believe that he loved her 4 years ago. I have not a single doubt about that, but does he love her now? Well, maybe, but it seems like he only loves her when she starts to behave like the girl she used to be 4 years ago, before all that shit happened. But all that shit did happen and it changed her, and it changed Roma too, and Julieta accepts Roma for who he is now, while Roma, in my eyes, seems to struggle a lot in repaying this favor. And to add to that, I feel like the author didn't spend a lot of time talking about their relationship from his perspective. While we got quite a few scenes of Juliet explaining how she feels about it all, we do not get that from Roma. And I would have appreciated a little more of a balance there. Because right now I feel for Giulietta, I don't really feel for Roma. Overall, as I said, if you like fantasy books, if you like adventure books, These Violent Delights is definitely worth your time. I personally enjoyed it a lot. It was an easy read, an intriguing read, and I know that sooner or later I will be giving a second book in the series a try. But that's just my opinion. What about yours?